Welcome back to another extraordinary journey through time. Today, we're tackling one of humanity's most audacious adventures, a story so epic, so improbable, that if you pitched it as fiction, no one would believe it could happen. Picture this. A small band of humans, equipped with nothing more than stone tools, animal skins, and an unbreakable will to survive, stands at the edge of the most hostile landscape on Earth. Before them stretches Siberia, millions of square miles of frozen wasteland where temperatures plunge to minus 60 degrees Celsius, where winter nights last for months, and where a single mistake means certain death. These aren't just any humans. They're our ancestors. And somehow, impossibly, they're about to cross this frozen hell and make it to the other side. How did they do it? How did people who had evolved under the African sun learn to survive in a land of perpetual ice? What technologies did they invent? What routes did they take? And perhaps most intriguingly, what drove them forward into the unknown when staying put would have been so much safer? For decades, scientists believed they had the answers. Then ancient DNA changed everything. Discoveries in frozen caves, footprints preserved for millennia, and genetic secrets locked in our own cells have revealed a story far more complex and fascinating than anyone imagined. This isn't just about survival. It is about the moment when humanity proved there was nowhere on Earth we couldn't reach, nothing we couldn't overcome. Today, we're following in the footsteps of the first Siberians, unraveling one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. Chapter 1. Out of Africa, the sun beats down on the East African savanna as it has for millions of years. But something fundamental is about to change. Around 70,000 years ago, a group of anatomically modern humans, people who would look perfectly normal walking down a street today, made a decision that will alter the course of history. They leave Africa. These aren't the first humans to venture beyond the continent of our birth. Homo erectus had left nearly 2 million years earlier, and Neanderthals already inhabit Europe and Western Asia. But this migration is different. The people leaving Africa now possess something their predecessors lacked: sophisticated language, abstract thinking, and cultural complexity that allows them to innovate at unprecedented speed. They carry with them a cognitive revolution that will enable them to adapt to any environment Earth can throw at them. The initial push outward likely follows established routes along the southern coast of Arabia. Climate data tells us this period coincides with a brief wet phase in what is usually desert, creating green corridors that make the journey possible. These pioneers hug coastlines, following food sources, never straying far from water. They're not exploring, they're simply following game animals and edible plants into new territories. They have no grand plan to colonize the world. They're just trying to eat. But these migrants bring something revolutionary with them, a sophisticated toolkit that will prove essential for the challenges ahead. They've mastered fire, not just using it opportunistically, but creating it on demand, carrying it with them, controlling it. Fire provides warmth, protection from predators, and the ability to cook food, extracting more nutrients from difficult-to-digest plants and meat. In Africa, fire is useful. In Siberia, it will mean the difference between life and death. Their stone tool technology has reached new heights of sophistication. Using a technique called prepared core reduction, they can strike multiple sharp blades from a single stone, creating tools that are lighter, sharper, and more versatile than anything that came before. They fashion spears with stone points, developing throwing techniques that allow them to hunt from a safe distance. They create scrapers for processing hides, awls for punching holes, and burins for engraving bone and antler. Perhaps most importantly, they possess the cognitive ability to plan ahead, to imagine future problems and create solutions before those problems arise. When they see animal skins, they don't just see meat, they see potential clothing. When they see caves, they don't just see shelter, they see homes that can be improved. This capacity for abstract thought and forward planning will prove absolutely essential when they reach lands where mistakes aren't forgiven. The migrants reached the Levant, modern-day Israel, Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan around 60,000 to 50,000 years ago. Here they encounter a landscape in flux. Climate oscillations create periods of abundance, followed by harsh droughts. Resources concentrate around reliable water sources, rivers, springs, and lakes. Competition for these resources is fierce. Archaeological sites from this period reveal something fascinating. These humans are already adapting their behavior to new environments. They're hunting different animals than they did in Africa, exploiting different plants, adjusting their tool designs to match available stone types. This behavioral flexibility, the ability to observe, learn, and innovate, is the secret weapon that will carry them across continents. But the Levant is also where our ancestors meet their cousins. Neanderthals have lived in this region for hundreds of thousands of years. They're supremely adapted to the cooler climates, with stocky builds that conserve heat, large nasal passages that warm cold air before it reaches their lungs, and sophisticated hunting strategies honed over millennia. The meeting between modern humans and Neanderthals isn't peaceful coexistence or violent war, it's something more intimate. DNA evidence shows that interbreeding occurs, and everyone with ancestry outside Africa today carries 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA in their genome. This genetic gift from our extinct cousins may have provided crucial adaptations for surviving in colder climates. Neanderthal genes affect our immune systems, our skin and hair, even our cold tolerance. In a very real sense, the Neanderthals never went extinct. They were absorbed, their genetic legacy helping their hybrid descendants conquer the world. From the Middle East, human populations begin radiating in multiple directions. Some move south along the Indian coast, eventually reaching Southeast Asia and Australia by around 50,000 years ago. Others push north into the Caucasus and Anatolia. Still others move east across the Iranian plateau towards Central Asia. These eastern migrants enter a world dramatically different from tropical Africa. Seasonal temperature variations intensify. Resources become more scattered and unpredictable. The easy coastal lifestyle gives way to something harder, requiring new strategies and technologies. Archaeological sites from this period show evidence of specialized hunting techniques for large herbivores, mammoths, bison, and wild horses. These animals provide enormous amounts of meat, fat, and raw materials, but hunting them requires coordination, planning, and sophisticated weaponry. The populations moving eastward also develop new social structures. Larger, more complex social networks emerge, binding groups together through shared rituals, exchange networks, and kinship systems. These connections aren't luxuries, they're survival mechanisms. When local resources fail, you need relationships with other groups who can provide assistance. Information flows through these networks. Knowledge about distant water sources, warnings about dangerous predators, innovations in tool technology. By 45,000 years ago, modern humans have reached the edges of the Siberian frontier. Before them lies the ultimate test, a frozen continent where winter lasts for 9 months, where blizzards can kill in hours, and where every aspect of existence requires technology, planning, and cooperation. The people standing at this threshold can't know it, but they are about to embark on one of history's greatest adventures, a journey that will carry them across the roof of the world and into a virgin continent beyond. The stage is set, the challenge awaits, and humanity is about to prove that no frontier is unconquerable. Chapter 2. The Ice Age World. The Earth our ancestors face as they approach Siberia is almost unrecognizable compared to today's world. We're in the depths of the last glacial period, and massive ice sheets cover much of the northern hemisphere. In North America, glaciers extend as far south as modern New York City and Seattle. Scandinavia disappears beneath ice kilometers thick. Britain isn't an island. It is connected to continental Europe by a vast plain that will eventually become the North Sea. But the ice sheets themselves aren't Siberia's primary challenge. Most of Siberia remains ice-free throughout the glacial period, protected from glacier formation by extremely low precipitation. The snow that feeds glaciers simply doesn't fall here. Instead, Siberia becomes something stranger and more dangerous. A frozen desert, a vast steppe tundra ecosystem unlike anything existing on Earth today. Temperatures across this landscape drop to levels that would kill an unprepared human in hours. Winter lows regularly hit -50 to -60 degrees Celsius. At these temperatures, exposed skin freezes in minutes. Breathing becomes dangerous as frigid air sears lungs. Metal becomes brittle. Water thrown into the air freezes before hitting the ground. Even the ground itself transforms, freezing solid to depths of hundreds of meters, creating permafrost that persists year-round. Yet this frozen wasteland isn't empty. In fact, it supports one of the most productive ecosystems in Earth's history, the mammoth steppe. Genetic and paleobotanical evidence reveals a landscape dominated by hardy grasses, sedges, and sage. In summer, these plants grow explosively, taking advantage of near-constant sunlight and nutrient-rich soils. The biomass they produce is staggering enough to support enormous populations of large herbivores. Woolly mammoths roam this landscape in herds numbering in the thousands. These magnificent creatures stand 4 meters tall at the shoulder, covered in shaggy brown fur and sporting curved tusks up to 5 meters long. They're perfectly adapted to the cold, with tiny ears that minimize heat loss, fat deposits that provide insulation and energy reserves, and the ability to smell water sources beneath snow and ice. For early humans, mammoths represent both opportunity and danger. A single animal provides several tons of meat, fat, bones for tools and building materials, and hide for clothing. But hunting them requires exceptional skill, courage, and coordination. Alongside mammoths graze vast herds of steppe bison, horses, reindeer, and musk oxen. Woolly rhinoceroses, weighing up to 3,000 kilograms, use their horn to sweep snow aside and reach buried vegetation. Cave lions, the largest cats that ever lived, hunt these mega herbivores, and their roars echo across the frozen plains. Giant short-faced bears, standing 4 meters tall on hind legs, compete with humans for carcasses and cave shelters. This isn't the lifeless ice desert one might imagine. It's a dynamic, competitive environment where resources are abundant, but accessing them requires specialized knowledge and technology. The question facing human migrants is simple. Can they acquire these adaptations fast enough to survive? The Ice Age isn't a static period of uniform cold. Climate oscillates between glacial maximums periods of intense cold and interstadials, brief warm periods when temperatures rise and ecosystems shift. These oscillations occur on both long timescales, thousands of years, and short timescales, decades or even years. For human populations, this variability creates both challenges and opportunities. During interstadials, forests expand northward. The mammoth steppe retreats, and with it the megafauna herds. But milder temperatures make northern regions more accessible to human populations adapted to warmer climates. Archaeological evidence suggests that human expansion into Siberia occurs in pulses, coinciding with these warmer periods. Groups push north during interstadials, establish themselves, develop cold-adapted technologies, and then persist through the following cold snap. But there's a catch. Interstadials are unpredictable. A warm period might last a few centuries or just a few decades. Populations that move north expecting continued warmth can find themselves trapped when climate shifts back toward glacial conditions. Those who survive these climate whiplashes are those who innovate fastest, who develop technologies that work regardless of temperature fluctuations, who build social systems resilient enough to withstand years of hardship. One of the Ice Age's most dramatic impacts affects not temperature, but geography. With so much water locked up in ice sheets, global sea levels drop by 120 meters or more. Coastlines extend far beyond their modern positions, exposing vast continental shelves. The Bering Strait, today a narrow waterway separating Asia from Alaska, disappears entirely, replaced by a landmass called Beringia that's nearly 2,000 kilometers wide from north to south. Beringia isn't just a bridge, it's a country, a vast territory with its own ecosystems, its own climate, its own resources. During glacial maximums, Beringia becomes a refuge, a place where steppe tundra ecosystems persist even as ice sheets advance to the north and south. Understanding Beringia's role is crucial to understanding how humans eventually reach the Americas. It's not a barrier to cross, but a homeland to inhabit, a place where populations can live for thousands of years, developing the specialized adaptations needed to thrive in extreme Arctic conditions. Standing at the edge of this frozen world, potential migrants face a stark reality. Every aspect of their African and Middle Eastern lifestyle must change. Gathering plant foods, the primary subsistence strategy in warmer climates, becomes impossible for much of the year. Hunting must intensify, targeting larger prey that can sustain groups through long winters. Shelter requirements multiply. Simple windbreaks and rock overhangs won't suffice when nighttime temperatures drop 70 degrees below freezing. Clothing transforms from optional comfort to life or death necessity. Humans are tropical animals, designed to dissipate heat, not conserve it. Our hairless skin, efficient sweating system, and relatively lean builds work beautifully in the heat, but become catastrophic liabilities in Siberian cold. Without sophisticated clothing, humans can't survive a single winter night outdoors. Fire mastery must advance beyond anything achieved in Africa. Fire isn't just for cooking anymore. It's for survival, for creating microclimates within shelters, for working materials that freeze solid in ambient temperatures. But maintaining fire in extreme cold, high winds, and limited fuel availability requires new techniques, new knowledge, new cultural practices. Perhaps most challengingly, the cognitive demands intensify. Mistakes in Africa might cause discomfort. Mistakes in Siberia cause death. Planning horizons must extend across seasons and years. Storage becomes essential. You can't gather food daily when the landscape is buried under meters of snow. Social cooperation must deepen, because no individual or small family unit can master all the skills needed for survival. The people poised to enter Siberia carry two crucial advantages: the behavioral flexibility to create new solutions and the social complexity to share innovations across generations. These traits will be tested to their absolute limits in the frozen lands ahead, but they'll prove sufficient barely to transform tropical apes into Arctic survivors. The crossing is about to begin. Chapter 3: Technological Revolution. Nothing is more fundamental to Siberian survival than clothing, and nothing requires more sophisticated technology to create. When humans first approached the frozen north, they possess simple animal skins, perhaps draped over shoulders or wrapped around waists. This is utterly inadequate for Siberian winters. Creating effective cold weather clothing requires revolutionary advances in multiple technologies simultaneously. First comes leather processing. Raw hides are stiff, prone to rot, and provide minimal insulation. Creating supple, durable leather requires scraping away fat and flesh, treating the hide with brains or other compounds containing emulsifying agents, working and stretching the material, and sometimes smoking it to make it water-resistant. Archaeological evidence from Siberian sites shows intensive hide processing activities, with specialized scrapers worn down from thousands of hours of use. But even perfect leather isn't enough. The key to cold weather survival is trapping air, creating dead air space that body heat can warm without losing it to the environment. Fur provides this insulation naturally, but using fur effectively requires understanding which animals provide the best fur and how to position fur for maximum warmth. Reindeer fur, with its hollow hairs, provides exceptional insulation. Arctic fox fur resists frost formation. Each species offers different advantages, and skilled clothing makers combine materials strategically. The breakthrough comes with tailored clothing, garments specifically shaped to fit the human body, sewn together with thread made from animal sinews. Hide needles, one of humanity's most important inventions, appear in the archaeological record around 40,000 years ago, coinciding with human expansion into colder regions. These simple tools enable revolutionary clothing designs. Instead of draped skins, you can create fitted pants, long-sleeve coats, mittens, and boots. You can create multiple layers, trapping air between them. You can make closures that seal out wind. Shelter technology undergoes equally dramatic transformation. In moderate climates, humans use caves opportunistically or build simple temporary structures. Siberia demands something more ambitious. Purpose-built dwellings designed to retain heat and protect inhabitants from extreme weather lasting months. Some of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries come from sites where ancient peoples build structures from mammoth bones. At Nazirek in Ukraine, dating to around 15,000 years ago, archaeologists find circular structures 4 to 6 meters across, with walls constructed from hundreds of mammoth bones, skulls, long bones, and tusks, carefully arranged and weighted down with more bones. These aren't random piles, but sophisticated structures requiring detailed planning and enormous labor investment. The construction process tells us much about the builder's ingenuity. First, they excavate a shallow pit, lowering the living floor below ground level for insulation. Then they arrange massive mammoth skulls in a circle to form the base of the walls. Jawbones, positioned like shingles, overlap to create a windproof barrier. Long bones and tusks arc overhead, forming a framework for the roof. The entire structure is probably covered with animal hides, creating an enclosed space that can be heated with a central hearth. Inside these structures, archaeological evidence reveals organized living spaces. Hearths occupy central positions, radiating heat throughout the dwelling. Stone tools accumulate in specific work areas, flint knapping in one zone, hide processing in another. Sleeping areas line the walls, probably insulated with layers of grass and furs. Storage pits preserve food through the winter. These aren't temporary camps, they're homes, occupied repeatedly, maintained across generations. Maintaining fire in extreme cold requires solving multiple challenges simultaneously. Fuel becomes scarce as you move north. Forests give way to parkland, then to open tundra with only scattered dwarf willows and shrubs. Yet fire's importance increases even as fuel decreases. How do Arctic peoples solve this paradox? Animal bones and fat provide part of the answer. At many Siberian sites, excavators find hearths filled not with wood ash, but with burnt bone. Bones, especially mammoth bones rich in marrow, burn slowly but reliably, providing steady heat for hours. Fat, rendered from meat and stored in skin containers, serves as lamp fuel. Archaeological sites yield stone. Lamps, shallow bowls with channels for wicks made from moss or dried grass that could burn for hours on small amounts of fat, providing both light and warmth during the endless winter darkness. But there's another crucial element: fire-starting technology. In warm climates, you can afford to let fire die and make new fire later. In Siberian cold, allowing fire to go out might mean death. Archaeological evidence suggests that Arctic peoples maintain fire continuously, carrying embers when traveling, protecting them obsessively, treating fire as a living thing that must be fed and nurtured. Fire-starting technologies advance as well. Better friction methods, striking sparks from iron pyrite or flint, always having tinder ready in waterproof containers. The social and psychological dimensions of fire also intensify. The hearth becomes the center of existence, the place where people gather not just for warmth, but for social interaction, storytelling, tool-making, and teaching. Long winter nights with darkness lasting 20 hours or more are filled with firelight conversations where knowledge passes from elders to children. Knowledge about animal behavior, about distant territories, about techniques for survival. Fire is technology, but it's also culture. Hunting in the frozen north requires completely different strategies than hunting in Africa or the Middle East. Prey animals are larger, more dangerous, and often more desperate. Winter makes them vulnerable, but also aggressive. Technology must advance to match these challenges. Spear technology undergoes rapid evolution. Atlatwa spear throwers that use leverage to multiply throwing force appear in the archaeological record. These simple devices, essentially sticks with hooks that fit into the back of a spear, allow hunters to throw projectiles faster, farther, and with more penetrating power. A hunter with an atlatwa can kill a large animal from a relatively safe distance, reducing the risk of injury from counter-attacking prey. Weapon points become larger and more sophisticated. Clovis points, appearing later in the Americas, measure up to 20 centimeters long massive projectile points designed to inflict devastating wounds on megafauna. In Siberia, similar large points appear, crafted from carefully selected stone types or from ivory. These aren't just weapons, they're precision instruments with sharp edges, carefully thinned bases to fit into shafts, and designs tested through generations of use. Dit traps and drive techniques become central to hunting strategy. Archaeological and ethnographic evidence suggests that hunters learned to channel animals using landscape features, artificial barriers or fires toward ambush points or natural traps. A mammoth or bison moving across frozen ground might break through ice covering a concealed pit, becoming immobilized and vulnerable. Or hunters might drive entire herds toward cliffs, causing multiple animals to fall to their deaths. A brutal but efficient technique, yielding enormous quantities of meat. The toolkit carried by Siberian humans becomes dramatically more diverse and specialized than anything seen in warmer climates. Archaeological sites reveal dozens of distinct tool types, each designed for specific tasks. Scrapers for preparing hides, burins for engraving bone, and antler borers for making holes, wedges for splitting wood, chopping tools for processing carcasses, flaying knives for skinning, and many more. Materials diversify as well. Stone remains crucial, but bone, antler, ivory, and wood become equally important. Antler is particularly valuable. It's strong, can be carved with stone tools, holds a good edge, and is readily available from the huge herds of reindeer. From antler, Arctic peoples create spear points, needles, harpoons, fish hooks, and countless other items. The emergence of this specialized toolkit reflects something profound. Different individuals master different skills. No one person can be expert in all the technologies needed for survival. Instead, societies develop specialists, people known for making the best needles, or for being exceptional hide processors, or for their skill at crafting spear points. These specialists trade their products within communities and across regions, creating economic networks that bind populations together. Innovation accelerates through this specialization. When a single person focuses on perfecting needle making, they discover subtle improvements, better ways to drill eyes, optimal bone types, techniques for preventing breakage. These innovations spread through exchange networks, constantly improving the technology available to all groups. Perhaps the most important technological revolution is not in physical artifacts, but in knowledge systems. The accumulated understanding of how to survive that passes from generation to generation. Every aspect of Arctic life requires deep expertise. Which plants remain edible under snow? How to read weather signs, where animals congregate in different seasons? how to navigate across featureless landscapes, which ice is safe to cross, how to prevent frostbite, what to do if you fall through ice. This knowledge takes lifetimes to accumulate and can be lost in a generation if not transmitted carefully. Archaeological evidence suggests that Arctic peoples developed sophisticated teaching methods, using stories, songs, and practical demonstrations to ensure children absorb essential survival information. Some knowledge gets encoded in portable art-carved figures that might represent maps, hunting instructions, or navigation aids. The cognitive demands of Arctic survival may have driven brain development and cultural complexity. Groups that systematize knowledge, that create frameworks for teaching and learning, that honor elders as libraries of crucial information. These groups thrive. Others, less successful at knowledge transmission, don't survive the first truly catastrophic winter. By around 30,000 years ago, humans possessed the complete technological package needed for Siberian survival. Fire, clothing, shelter, hunting weapons, and accumulated knowledge combine to create a suite of adaptations that makes life possible in the harshest environments Earth offers. But technology alone isn't enough. The frozen lands also demand new forms of social organization, new ways of humans relating to each other. That's the challenge they face next. Chapter 4. Into the Mammoth Lands. Around 45,000 years ago, something remarkable happened in the archaeological record of Northern Asia. For the first time, we find unambiguous evidence of modern human presence at high latitudes. Stone tools, butchered animal bones, harsh, and occasionally even human remains. These sites appear scattered across southern Siberia, gradually moving northward as populations probe the frozen frontier. One of the earliest and most significant sites is Yana Rhinoceros Horn Site, located in Arctic Siberia at 71 degrees north latitude, well above the Arctic Circle. Dating to around 31,000 years ago, this site preserves extraordinary evidence of human adaptation to extreme conditions. Excavators find thousands of stone tools, butchered remains of woolly mammoths, horses, bison, and woolly rhinoceroses, and remarkable artifacts carved from mammoth ivory and rhinoceros horn, including spear foreshafts, functional items, and decorative beads. What makes Yana so significant isn't just its age, but its location. These people live only about 500 kilometers from the Arctic Ocean, in a region where winter temperatures drop below -50 degrees Celsius and winter darkness lasts for months. They're not occasional visitors taking advantage of brief summer. Resources evidence of butchered juvenile animals suggests year-round occupation. These are permanent Arctic residents, successfully employing the full technological package needed for extreme cold survival. But before humans reached the high Arctic, they established themselves in southern Siberia, a vast region stretching from the Altai Mountains in the west to Lake Baikal in the east. This region serves as a training ground, a place where populations develop cold weather adaptations while still having access to more temperate refugia. The Altai Mountains hold particular archaeological treasures. Denisova Cave, perched in the foothills, contains one of the longest continuous records of human occupation in northern Asia. Neanderthals used this cave first, leaving behind their distinctive tools and remains. Then, around 50,000 years ago, modern humans arrive. But the cave also yields something unexpected: remains of a previously unknown human group, now called Denisovans. DNA extracted from a tiny finger bone and from cave sediments reveals that Denisovans are distinct from both Neanderthals and modern humans, representing a separate lineage that split from our common ancestor hundreds of thousands of years earlier. And astonishingly, genetic analysis of modern populations shows that Denisovans interbred with modern humans. People living today in Melanesia and Australia carry significant Denisovan ancestry evidence of ancient encounters occurring somewhere in Asia as modern humans expanded. These encounters between modern humans, Neanderthals, and Denisovans aren't mere historical curiosities. They have real consequences for Arctic adaptation. Recent genetic studies revealed that some of the genes modern Tibetans used to live at high altitude originally came from Denisovans. The EPAS1 gene variant, which helps the body respond efficiently to low oxygen conditions, was acquired through interbreeding tens of thousands of years ago and has been under strong positive selection ever since. If Denisovan genes help with high-altitude adaptation, did they also contribute to cold adaptation? The answer appears to be yes. Modern humans moving into Siberia encountered Denisovan populations already adapted to northern conditions after hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. Interbreeding allows modern humans to rapidly acquire beneficial genetic variants, a kind of genetic shortcut to cold adaptation that would otherwise take many generations to evolve. This mixing of human lineages in Siberia creates what some researchers call hybrid vigor populations that combine the cognitive sophistication and cultural complexity of modern humans with beneficial genetic adaptations from archaic humans. It's this hybrid population, carrying genetic gifts from our extinct cousins, that ultimately conquers the Arctic. Archaeological evidence reveals that these early Siberians organized their lives around megafauna herds. Site after site shows concentrated hunting of mammoths, steppe bison, and horses. But this isn't opportunistic hunting. It's systematic exploitation based on detailed understanding of animal behavior. Mammoth behavior patterns, reconstructed from modern elephants and from Ice Age evidence, suggest these animals are highly social, living in matriarchal family groups that follow seasonal migration routes. Older females, with decades of accumulated knowledge, lead herds to water sources, mineral deposits, and protected calving grounds. For human hunters, understanding these patterns is crucial. Instead of randomly searching the landscape, they can predict where mammoths will be during different seasons, positioning themselves at strategic locations. Some kill sites suggest sophisticated hunting strategies. At Beringia in Yakutia, thousands of mammoth bones accumulate in a single location. The age and sex profile of the animals suggests selective hunting, perhaps targeting younger, more vulnerable individuals or isolating older animals from protective herds. At other sites, mammoth remains show evidence of being processed in specific sequences. First the hide, then the meat, then the fat, then the bones for tools and building materials, finally using marrow and bone grease. Nothing is wasted. But hunting isn't constant warfare against megafauna. Ethnographic studies of modern Arctic peoples reveal that even skilled hunters succeed only occasionally, often going weeks between major kills. Between hunting episodes, people depend on fishing, bird hunting, gathering the limited plant foods available, and scavenging. The romantic image of fearless mammoth hunters needs tempering with the reality of a more diverse subsistence strategy that includes significant periods of making do with whatever is available. Survival in the Arctic requires larger social groups than those found in many warmer regions. The technological complexity, the knowledge demands, the danger of hunting large prey, and the need for mutual assistance during times of scarcity all favor bands of 25 to 50 individuals rather than smaller family units. But archaeological site sizes suggest something more complex than simple bands. Many sites show evidence of seasonal aggregation periods when multiple bands come together, creating temporary communities of 100 or more people. These gatherings serve multiple purposes, sharing information about distant territories, trading valuable materials like high-quality stone or amber, arranging marriages to maintain genetic diversity, conducting ceremonies, and simply enjoying social interaction after months of isolation. The timing of these aggregations probably coincides with resource-abundant summer fish runs, caribou migrations, or locations where multiple mammoth herds congregate. At these times and places, the landscape can temporarily support larger human populations. Archaeological evidence suggests that people use these gatherings for intensive tool-making, drawing on the pooled expertise of specialists from multiple groups. One of the most challenging aspects of Arctic life is managing territories vast enough to sustain populations through resource fluctuations. In tropical regions, a hunter-gatherer band might occupy a territory of a few hundred square kilometers. In Siberia, viable territories must be 10 or 20 times larger, encompassing diverse ecosystems that provide resources at different seasons. Archaeological evidence suggests that groups develop regular movement patterns, visiting the same locations repeatedly year after year. These aren't random wanderings, but planned circuits that maximize resource availability. Summer camps near rivers where salmon spawn, fall camps near caribou migration routes, winter camps in protected valleys with access to firewood. Each season has optimal locations, determined by generations of accumulated knowledge. But these territories overlap and populations maintain connections with neighboring groups. Marriage networks create kinship ties that obligate mutual assistance. Trading partnerships establish relationships that can be called upon during times of need. These social connections are more than cultural preferences. They're survival strategies, insurance policies against the random disasters that can devastate any single group. Archaeological sites form a pattern that reveals gradual northward expansion. Initially, humans occupy southern Siberia, areas with relatively moderate climates and diverse resources. Over millennia, sites appear progressively far to north, tracking into regions of increasing cold and harshness. What drives this expansion? Part of the answer is probably population pressure. As southern territories fill with human groups, younger individuals must either displace established populations or move into marginal territories. These marginal zones, the edges of the inhabited world, attract the ambitious, the desperate, and the innovative. Here, away from established traditions, new solutions can flourish. But there's also an element of exploration and discovery in human nature. Not everyone is content to follow established patterns. Some individuals, some groups, push boundaries simply to see what lies beyond. This curiosity, this drive to explore, is part of our cognitive inheritance. It's what carried us out of Africa in the first place, and it continues to pull populations northward into lands no human has ever seen. By 30,000 years ago, humans occupy Siberia from its southern border to the Arctic coast. They've become true Arctic specialists, equipped with sophisticated technologies, complex social organizations, and accumulated knowledge that allows them to thrive in conditions that would kill an unprepared person in hours. They've transformed themselves from tropical apes into masters of the frozen north. But the journey isn't over. Even farther north and east lies Beringia, a vast land bridge connecting Asia to Alaska, a territory that will serve as the staging ground for humanity's entry into the Americas. The next chapter of human expansion is about to begin. Chapter 5. Beringia. Today, when you look at a map of the North Pacific, you see the Bering Strait, a narrow waterway about 85 kilometers wide separating Russia from Alaska. Ships pass through carrying cargo between Asia and North America. Waters here are shallow, rarely exceeding 50 meters in depth. But this modern geography conceals one of the most important landscapes in human history. During the last glacial maximum, when ice sheets lock up vast amounts of water and sea levels drop 120 meters below their current position, the Bering Strait doesn't exist. In its place lies Beringia, a landmass stretching nearly 2,000 kilometers from north to south and extending hundreds of kilometers from the Asian coast to Alaska. This isn't a narrow bridge you could cross in a few days of walking. It's a country, a territory larger than modern Spain, with its own diverse ecosystems, its own climate, its own plant and animal communities. Understanding Beringia is crucial to understanding how humans reached the Americas. This isn't a barrier to overcome, but a homeland to inhabit, a place where populations live for thousands of years, developing specialized Arctic adaptations that will eventually allow them to colonize an entire hemisphere. The Beringian ecosystem Beringia during the Ice Age supports a unique ecosystem unlike anything existing on Earth today. Core samples from the ocean floor, now submerged lake sediments, and preserved pollen reveal a landscape dominated by herbaceous tundra vegetation, grasses, sedges, forbs, and sages. Unlike the wet, boggy tundra of the modern Arctic, Beringian tundra is relatively dry, with cold temperatures limiting precipitation. This creates what scientists call steppe tundra or mammoth steppe, a highly productive grassland capable of supporting enormous biomass. The plant communities are remarkably diverse. During brief summers, the landscape erupts in colorful blooms as hundreds of plant species flower simultaneously, taking advantage of nearly constant daylight. These plants have evolved strategies for surviving extreme conditions. Some remain evergreen beneath snow, photosynthesizing whenever temperatures allow. Others store energy in roots and tubers that can survive being frozen solid. Still others complete their entire life cycle in just a few weeks of favorable weather. This vegetation supports staggering numbers of large herbivores. Mammoths, steppe bison, horses, and caribou roam Beringia in herds that dwarf anything seen in modern times. Predators follow the herds: cave lions, short-faced bears, wolves, and eventually humans. The abundance of large animals creates what ecologists call a megafauna ecosystem, where the movements and behaviors of giant herbivores shape the landscape itself. Mammoths knock down trees, creating openings for grasslands. Their dung fertilizes soils and spreads seeds. Their trails channel water and create paths that other animals follow for generations. Beringia's climate is extreme but stable. Because the land bridge lies far from glaciers and ocean influences, it experiences a continental climate with cold, dry winters and brief, relatively warm summers. Winter temperatures regularly drop below -40 degrees Celsius, but the absence of wind chill from ocean storms makes these temperatures somewhat more bearable than similar temperatures in more exposed regions. The landscape features diverse topography. River valleys cut through rolling plains, providing sheltered camping locations and reliable water sources. Low mountain ranges create barriers that influence animal movements and weather patterns. Coastal areas along the Arctic Ocean and the southern shores of Beringia offer maritime resources: seals, fish, seabirds that supplement the interior's terrestrial game. Crucially, Beringia remains largely ice-free throughout the glacial maximum. While massive ice sheets cover Canada and Scandinavia, Beringia's low precipitation prevents glacier formation. This makes it a refugium, a place where both plants and animals persist even when ice locks up surrounding regions. For humans, this means Beringia isn't just a route of passage, but a viable homeland where populations can live continuously for thousands of years. One of the most remarkable discoveries in recent years comes from genetic analysis of modern Native American populations. Scientists examining the DNA of indigenous peoples across the Americas notice something peculiar. Genetic diversity is relatively low compared to Asian populations, and certain genetic markers appear at high frequency across both North and South America. The explanation reveals an extraordinary story. Modern Native Americans descend from a founding population that was small, perhaps just a few thousand individuals, and relatively isolated for an extended period. Genetic modeling suggests this isolation lasted between 5,000 and 15,000 years, with the most likely scenario putting it around 8,000 to 10,000 years. During this Beringian standstill, the ancestral population lives in Beringia, genetically separated from Asian populations to the west, and unable to move east into the Americas because massive ice sheets blocked the route. This standstill period has profound implications. It means the people who eventually colonized the Americas aren't recent arrivals from Asia, but descendants of populations who spent millennia in Beringia, developing unique genetic characteristics and cultural adaptations. When ice sheets finally retreat enough to allow eastward movement, the people who enter the Americas are true Arctic specialists carrying genetic variants that help them survive extreme cold and possess sophisticated technologies honed through generations of life in one of Earth's harshest environments. Finding archaeological evidence of Beringian occupation poses an obvious challenge. Most of Beringia now lies beneath 50 meters of ocean water. When sea levels rose at the end of the Ice Age, around 11,000 years ago, the land bridge flooded relatively quickly in geological terms. Any sites that early Beringians established in coastal areas or river valleys, the most attractive locations for human occupation, now rest on the ocean floor, buried beneath sediment and inaccessible to traditional archaeology. Yet tantalizing clues emerge from the margins of ancient Beringia. On the Seward Peninsula in Alaska, at Swan Point and Broken Mammoth, archaeologists find sites dating to 14,000 years ago, with distinctive stone tool technologies that appear related to Siberian traditions but show unique Beringian developments. In eastern Siberia, sites like Baralek and Yana preserve evidence of populations with lifestyles that must have extended into Beringia when the land bridge existed. Some researchers propose using underwater archaeology to explore submerged Beringian sites. The Bering Strait, with its relatively shallow waters, is technically accessible to divers and submersibles. A few exploratory surveys have been conducted, revealing preserved landscapes with ancient river channels and lake basins. But finding human sites in this vast underwater terrain is like searching for needles in a haystack. Still, as technology improves, the prospect of discovering preserved Beringian settlements becomes increasingly realistic. Life in Beringia demands adaptations beyond even those required for Siberian survival. The latitude much of Beringia lies above 65 degrees north means extreme seasonal variation in daylight. In midwinter, the sun barely rises above the horizon, and the landscape plunges into weeks of twilight followed by weeks of complete darkness. In midsummer, the reverse occurs. The sun circles the sky, never fully setting, bathing the landscape in continuous daylight for months. These light patterns affect everything. Human sleep cycles must adjust to prolonged darkness and prolonged light. Vitamin D production from sunlight varies dramatically between seasons, requiring dietary adaptations to prevent deficiency. Animal behavior changes with the light. Many species migrate, following optimal conditions rather than enduring the extreme seasonal swings. Beringian peoples likely develop sophisticated astronomical knowledge. With clear, dark winter skies, the stars, moon, and aurora borealis become crucial elements of the environment. Seasonal changes in star positions help mark time and predict resource availability. Some researchers suggest that astronomical knowledge might be encoded in portable art from this period, scratches on bone or ivory that could represent star patterns, lunar cycles, or seasonal calendars. One of the greatest challenges of Beringian life is maintaining viable population sizes across enormous territories. Small, isolated groups face genetic problems from inbreeding and are vulnerable to extinction from random disasters. But Beringia's vastness makes frequent contact between distant groups difficult. Archaeological and genetic evidence suggests that Beringian peoples solve this problem through far-flung social networks. Raw materials found at sites often come from sources hundreds of kilometers away, amber from the Arctic coast, obsidian from volcanic regions in Alaska, particular stone types from known outcrops. These materials do not arrive through direct collection, but through exchange networks that connect groups across the land bridge. Marriage practices probably play a crucial role in maintaining these networks. Ethnographic evidence from modern Arctic peoples shows elaborate systems for arranging marriages between distant groups. ensuring genetic exchange and establishing kinship obligations that span vast distances. A similar system probably operates in Beringia, with individuals traveling hundreds of kilometers to find marriage partners, creating ties that bind far-flung communities into a single, interconnected population. These networks also serve as information highways. Knowledge about resource availability, weather patterns, animal movements, and dangers flows through social connections. When one group discovers a productive hunting ground or develops an improved tool design, that information spreads through the network, benefiting populations across the entire land bridge. For thousands of years, Beringian populations live in a holding pattern. To the west lies Siberia, already fully occupied by human populations. To the east lies Alaska, technically reachable but blocked by massive glaciers that make further eastward movement impossible. The Cordilleran ice sheet covers coastal Alaska and British Columbia, while the Laurentide ice sheet blankets most of Canada. Between them, during maximum glaciation, lies no passage, just thousands of kilometers of ice, hundreds of meters thick. Beringian peoples are trapped, not in a prison, but in a vast homeland that sustains them but offers no route forward. They hunt mammoths and bison, fish the rivers, gather what plants the brief summers offer. Children are born, grow up, have children of their own. Generations pass. Cultural traditions develop and evolve. Technologies improve incrementally. The population slowly expands within the available territory. Then, beginning around 16,000 years ago, the global climate began shifting. Temperatures rise slightly. Ice sheets start retreating. Glaciers that have stood for millennia begin to melt. Most importantly for Beringian peoples, corridors start opening potential routes through the ice that might allow access to lands beyond. But this climate shift brings consequences. As temperatures rise, sea levels begin increasing. Water that had been locked in ice for thousands of years flows back into the oceans. The Bering Strait begins to reappear. Beringia, the land bridge, the homeland, starts to shrink. Coastal areas flood. River valleys become bays. The territory that sustained populations for millennia begins to disappear beneath the waves. The Beringian peoples face a choice: adapt to a shrinking homeland, retreat westward into already occupied Siberia, or venture eastward into unknown lands. Some groups undoubtedly choose each option. But for those who move east, who take the gamble on finding new territories beyond the ice, an entire hemisphere awaits. A virgin continent teeming with game that has never seen human hunters' landscapes. No person has ever walked opportunities beyond imagination. The door to the Americas is opening. The question is, who will be first to walk through? Chapter 6. The Ice-Free Corridor. Around 17,000 years ago, Earth's climate began a fundamental shift. After millennia of glacial cold, temperatures start rising. The change is gradual at first, perhaps just a degree or two over centuries, but it triggers a cascade of consequences that reshape the entire northern hemisphere. Ice sheets that have stood for tens of thousands of years begin their slow, inexorable retreat. For people living in Beringia, these changes manifest in multiple ways. Summers grow slightly warmer and longer. Plant communities shift, with shrubs and eventually trees beginning to appear in regions that had been pure tundra. Animal populations respond to changing vegetation, altering their migration routes and behaviors. But most dramatically, the ice sheets blocking eastward movement into the Americas begin to fracture. Two massive ice sheets dominate the geography of northern North America during the glacial maximum. The Laurentide ice sheet, centered over Hudson Bay, spreads across most of Canada, reaching south to modern Iowa and covering everything east to the Atlantic Ocean. It is incomprehensibly vast, larger than the entire modern Antarctic ice sheet, and in places stands more than 3 kilometers thick. The Cordilleran ice sheet, smaller but still formidable, covers the mountain ranges of western Canada and Alaska, extending along the Pacific coast. During maximum glaciation, these two ice sheets merge, creating an unbroken wall of ice stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific. No land route connects Beringia to regions south of the ice. But as temperatures rise, the ice sheets begin separating. A narrow corridor starts opening between them, running roughly north-south through the eastern foothills of the Rocky Mountains. A province of Vang and roughly north-south through the eastern foothills of the Rocky Mountains. Of a potential pathway from Alaska to the Great Plains of North America. The ice-free corridor doesn't appear suddenly. Its opening is a slow, irregular process spanning thousands of years. Different sections become passable at different times. Even when technically ice-free, the corridor initially offers a harsh, inhospitable environment, a recently deglaciated landscape of barren rock, glacial lakes, and meltwater streams, with minimal vegetation and few animals. Geological evidence reveals the corridor's timeline. By 15,000 years ago, the ice sheets have separated enough to create openings in the northern sections. But these early openings are narrow, unstable, and blocked by massive glacial lakes. As ice continues melting, these lakes expand, periodically breaking through ice dams and releasing catastrophic floods that scour the landscape and make travel dangerous or impossible. Around 14,500 years ago, the corridor widened significantly. Lake cores from within the corridor preserve pollen that reveals plant colonization, first hardy pioneers like willows and sages, later more diverse communities including grasses that could support herbivores. By 13,000 years ago, the corridor had become a viable travel route, perhaps 25 to 50 kilometers wide in most places, with enough vegetation and animal life to sustain travelers making the journey from north to south. But this timeline poses a problem. Archaeological evidence suggests humans reach areas south of the ice sheets earlier than 13,000 years ago. Sites in the Americas, like Monte Verde in Chile, dating to 14,500 years ago or possibly earlier, indicate human presence well before the ice-free corridor becomes fully passable. This discrepancy has triggered intense scientific debate about how and when people first entered the Americas. If the ice-free corridor wasn't open early enough to account for the earliest American archaeological sites, how did people reach southern regions? The answer lies along the Pacific coast. During deglaciation, the western edge of the Cordilleran ice sheet retreats first, and evidence suggests that ice-free areas along the coast's shoreline and offshore islands become accessible earlier than interior routes. A coastal migration route offers several advantages. Marine resources, fish, shellfish, seals, sea otters, seabirds, provide abundant food supplies that don't require the specialized hunting techniques needed for land mammals. Kelp forests, which grow in cold, nutrient-rich waters, create highly productive ecosystems supporting diverse marine life. Travel by watercraft allows rapid movement along the coast, covering distances that would take weeks or months on foot. Archaeological evidence for coastal migration is difficult to find because, like Beringia, much of the Ice Age coastline now lies underwater. Sea level rise has flooded coastal areas where early migrants would have lived, burying sites beneath meters of sediment on the continental shelf. But a few tantalizing clues have emerged. On islands off British Columbia and Alaska, researchers find sites dating to 14,000 years ago with evidence of marine resource exploitation, fish bones, shell mittens, and tools designed for processing sea mammals. Genetic evidence also supports coastal migration. Populations from the Pacific Northwest show genetic patterns, suggesting long-term coastal resonance rather than recent arrival via interior routes. Linguistic and cultural similarities link indigenous groups along the Pacific coast from Alaska to California, suggesting ancient connections predating interior populations. The question of who first entered the Americas has captivated researchers for generations. Early theories dominant through much of the 20th century, proposed a single migration of Clovis people entering through the ice-free corridor around 13,000 years ago. Clovis culture, named for distinctive stone projectile points first discovered near Clovis, New Mexico, appears suddenly in the archaeological record across North America, seemingly representing the continent's first human inhabitants. But this neat story has collapsed under the weight of new evidence. Pre-Clovis sites locations with solid archaeological evidence predating Clovis culture have been confirmed across the Americas. Monte Verde in Chile, Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania, Paisley Caves in Oregon, and others push human presence in the Americas back to at least 14,500 years ago, possibly earlier. These sites show technological diversity. Not all early Americans made Clovis points, suggesting multiple migrations or rapid cultural diversification after arrival. Genetic analysis reveals astonishing complexity. Modern Native American populations descend primarily from a single ancestral group that split from Siberian populations during the Beringian standstill. But within this primary ancestry, geneticists detect multiple pulses of migration into the Americas at different times. Some populations show genetic contributions from groups that arrived before the main Clovis-era migration. Others carry genetic signals from later arrivals who crossed after Beringia began flooding. Ancient DNA from early American sites adds more layers to the story. Genetic analysis of human remains from different time periods and regions reveals population replacements, migrations, and mixing that paint a picture of demographic complexity rivaling any other continent. The first Americans weren't a monolithic wave, but multiple groups arriving at different times via different routes, competing and cooperating in landscapes empty of other humans. For groups using the ice-free corridor, the journey south represents one of history's most audacious adventures. The corridor stretches roughly 1,500 kilometers from north to south, a distance requiring weeks or months to traverse on foot. And it's not a pleasant stroll through parkland. This is recently deglaciated terrain, raw and harsh, with temperatures still cold, vegetation sparse, and resources unpredictable. Travelers must time their journey carefully. Summer offers the only realistic window. Attempting the corridor in winter would be suicidal, with temperatures plummeting, vegetation buried under snow, and animals migrating to more favorable regions. But even in summer, challenges abound. Glacial meltwater creates braided stream systems that change course unpredictably. Glacial lakes, dammed behind ice or moraine walls, can flood with little warning. Fog banks, common in areas near retreating glaciers, obscure visibility and make navigation treacherous. Groups making this journey probably travel in extended family units of 25 to 50 individuals, large enough to handle challenges but small enough to find sufficient resources along the route. They follow animal herds moving through the corridor: bison, elk, caribou, and eventually mammoths. These animals are pioneers themselves, colonizing newly available territories, and their trails become highways that humans follow. The journey would have been multi-generational. Travelers can't rush. They must stop when pregnant women need to give birth, when elders struggle with difficult terrain, when resources require time to process. Some groups might spend entire seasons at favorable locations within the corridor before continuing south. Children born during the journey would know no home except the trail, growing up in a liminal space between the Arctic homeland and the unknown lands ahead. As travelers emerge from the southern end of the ice-free corridor onto the Great Plains of North America, they encounter a landscape almost incomprehensibly vast and abundant. Before them stretches territory empty of humans, but teeming with life. Herds of mammoth, mastodon, giant ground sloths, camels, horses, and bison roam grasslands that seem endless. Rivers and lakes harbor fish populations that have never experienced human predation. Flocks of birds darken the sky during migrations. This is a hunter's paradise. Game animals that have no instinctive fear of humans, that don't flee at first sight, that can be approached closely before they recognize danger. Modern humans, carrying sophisticated weaponry and hunting strategies honed through thousands of years in Eurasia, possess overwhelming advantages over naive American megafauna. The animals might be larger and more formidable than their old world relatives, but they've evolved no defenses against human tactics. Archaeological evidence suggests explosive population growth following human entry into the Americas. Clovis points and other diagnostic early American artifacts appear across North America within just a few centuries, an incredibly rapid spread suggesting populations growing exponentially and expanding into every available niche. Computer models suggest that human populations could have grown from a few hundred initial migrants to tens of thousands within a few generations, given the resource abundance and lack of competition. But this abundance comes with a dark side. Within approximately 1,000 years of human arrival in the Americas, dozens of megafauna species went extinct: mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, horses, camels, giant short-faced bears, saber-toothed cats, and many others. The causes of these extinctions remain debated. Climate change at the end of the Ice Age certainly played a role, altering habitats and ecosystems. But human predation, both direct hunting and indirect effects like habitat alteration through fire, almost certainly contributed to the collapse of American megafauna populations. The entry into the Americas represents both humanity's greatest expansion and one of our most consequential impacts on global ecosystems. A pristine wilderness becomes a human landscape within just a few generations, transformed forever by the arrival of these sophisticated bipedal predators from across the Pacific. The story doesn't end with initial colonization. Genetic and archaeological evidence suggests that connections between Asia and the Americas continue for thousands of years after the first migrations. Before Beringia flooded completely around 11,000 years ago, multiple groups crossed in both directions. Some American populations show genetic affinities with Siberian groups that arrive after initial colonization, indicating later migrations. Conversely, some Siberian populations carry genetic signals from groups that spent time in the Americas before returning westward. Even after rising seas submerge the land bridge, connections persist. The Bering Strait, though flooded, remains narrow enough for determined travelers in watercraft to cross. Archaeological evidence from both sides of the strait shows cultural similarities, tool types, artistic styles, architectural features, suggesting ongoing exchange between Asian and American populations well into the Holocene. These continuing connections help explain cultural and linguistic patterns that puzzle researchers. The Aleut and Eskimo peoples, who live along both sides of the Bering Strait in historical times, speak related languages and share cultural practices, suggesting relatively recent common ancestry, far more recent than the initial colonization of the Americas. Their ancestors apparently crossed the strait from Asia to America long after Beringia flooded, representing one of the latest major migrations in this region's complex population history. The ice-free corridor and coastal routes ultimately carry humans from the frozen margins of Asia into every corner of the Western Hemisphere, from the Arctic tundra to Amazonian rainforests, from Caribbean islands to Patagonian steppes. Within just a few thousand years, descendants of Siberian mammoth hunters diversify into hundreds of distinct cultures adapted to every imaginable environment. The crossing of Beringia and the journey through ice opens a door that changes not just human history, but the history of an entire hemisphere. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before humans could reach the Americas, before they could walk through corridors in the ice, they had to survive thousands of years in the harshest training ground Earth could offer, the frozen heart of Siberia during the last glacial maximum. Chapter 7. The last glacial maximum around 26,000 years ago. Earth entered the coldest phase of the entire Ice Age, the last glacial maximum, or LGM. For the next 7,000 years, global average temperatures plunged to levels approximately 6 degrees Celsius below modern values. This might sound modest, just 6 degrees, but the effects are catastrophic and worldwide. Sea levels dropped to their lowest point, falling 120 to 130 meters below present levels. Ice sheets reached their maximum extent, covering 30% of Earth's land surface compared to just 10% today. Northern Hemisphere ice sheets contain roughly 3 times more ice than currently exists in Antarctica. For people living in Siberia and Beringia, the LGM represents the ultimate test of cold weather adaptation. Temperatures that were already brutal drop even further. Regional climate models suggest winter temperatures in central Siberia regularly reach minus 60 to minus 70 degrees Celsius, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in under a minute, cold enough that exhaled breath freezes into tiny ice crystals that fall to the ground with a rustling sound early Arctic explorers called the whisper of the stars. Precipitation drops to near desert levels. The cold, dry air can't hold moisture, so snowfall diminishes. This creates a seeming paradox. The coldest period has some of the least snow, but this actually benefits the mammoth steppe ecosystem. With limited snow cover, herbivores can access buried vegetation throughout winter. The massive megafauna herds that sustain human populations survive precisely because snow doesn't bury their food supply beneath insurmountable depths. The remarkable thing about the LGM isn't that human populations abandon Siberia, it's that they don't. Despite conditions that would kill modern humans lacking appropriate technology within hours, Ice Age Siberians not only survive, but maintain cultural continuity. Archaeological sites continue operating through the coldest millennia, showing that populations weather the glacial maximum in place, rather than retreating to more temperate regions. At Kostenki, located in the Don River Valley of western Russia, excavators find multiple occupation layers spanning from before the LGM through the glacial maximum and into the warming period afterward. The site contains remarkable artifacts, elaborate bone and ivory carvings, some of the earliest known musical instruments, flutes made from bird bone, and sophisticated dwelling structures constructed from mammoth bones. These aren't desperate survivors clinging to existence. These are culturally sophisticated societies with time and energy for art, music, and complex symbolic behavior. Similarly, at Malta in south-central Siberia, dated to around 24,000 years ago, right in the heart of the harshest, discover stunning ivory figurines depicting human forms, some of the earliest representational art found anywhere. These Venus figurines, characterized by emphasized female features, appear at multiple sites across Ice Age Europe and Siberia, suggesting shared cultural or symbolic systems spanning vast distances. The technical skill required to carve these delicate objects from mammoth ivory indicates specialists with time to perfect their craft, not populations struggling at the edge of survival. How do these people survive the coldest epoch? The answer lies in sophisticated integration of multiple adaptive strategies, each necessary but insufficient alone. Only by mastering all simultaneously can populations persist through the glacial maximum. Clothing technology reaches its peak during the LGM. Archaeological evidence, combined with ethnographic studies of historical Arctic peoples, reveals the kind of garments needed for survival. Multiple layers are essential: an inner layer of soft fur against the skin, a middle layer for insulation, and an outer shell of wind-resistant material. Each layer requires extensive preparation. Caribou hides must be tanned to perfection to remain soft and flexible in extreme cold. Fur must be cleaned and maintained to retain its insulating properties. Seams must be sealed with sinew stitching so tight that they're waterproof and windproof. Footwear becomes critically important. Feet, being furthest from the body's core, are most vulnerable to frostbite. Historical Arctic peoples developed sophisticated cold weather boots with multiple layers, inner socks of soft fur, middle insulating layers of dry grass or fur, outer boots of sealed hide, and sometimes outer shells of sealskin that resist moisture. Maintaining these boots requires constant attention, drying them thoroughly after each use, replacing grass insulation, repairing seams, but the effort means the difference between mobility and disability. Shelter technology also advances. The mammoth bone structures found at sites like Mazirik and Kostenki represent sophisticated architecture designed to retain every bit of heat. Partially subterranean construction puts living spaces below ground level, insulated by earth. Multiple hides cover the bone framework, creating dead air space between layers. Entry passages form cold traps that prevent direct wind penetration into living areas. Central hearths, carefully positioned to maximize heat distribution, operate continuously throughout winter months. But technology alone can't ensure survival. Social organization becomes equally crucial during the LGM. Larger group sizes provide multiple advantages. More hunters increase chances of successful kills. More food processors allow efficient use of every part of harvested animals. More knowledge bearers ensure critical information isn't lost to accident or illness. More protectors guard against predators and human threats. Archaeological evidence suggests that LGM populations maintain exchange networks spanning thousands of kilometers. Raw materials found at sites, particular types of stone, shells from distant oceans, amber from specific deposits, originate hundreds or even thousands of kilometers from where they're ultimately used. These materials don't appear through direct collection, but through exchange systems that connect widely scattered groups. Why maintain such far-flung connections during the coldest, most difficult period? The answer relates to risk management. Arctic survival depends on resources that are abundant but unpredictable. A region might have excellent hunting one year and terrible hunting the next. By maintaining relationships with distant groups, populations create insurance systems. When local resources fail, you can call upon obligations from distant partners, traveling to their territory and relying on reciprocal obligations established through years of exchange. Marriage systems probably play crucial roles in maintaining these networks. Ethnographic evidence from modern Arctic peoples reveals elaborate rules governing marriage partners, often requiring individuals to marry outside their local group, sometimes requiring partnerships with people from specific distant groups. These marriage patterns create kinship networks that obligate mutual assistance and information sharing across vast territories. The psychological and cognitive demands of LGM survival deserve emphasis. This isn't just about physical endurance, it's about mental capabilities that allow planning, innovation, and knowledge transmission under extreme stress. Consider the knowledge required for successful hunting. You must understand the behavior of multiple animal species across different seasons. You must read tracks in snow to determine species, age, sex, and time since passing. You must predict where animals will move based on weather patterns, vegetation availability, and mating cycles. You must know which animals are worth pursuing given current conditions and which represent more effort than they are worth. All this knowledge must be maintained mentally. There are no field guides, no written references, and transmitted across generations through oral teaching and demonstration. Navigation across featureless snow-covered landscapes requires exceptional spatial memory and environmental awareness. Historical Arctic peoples developed sophisticated navigation techniques using subtle cues, wind direction and consistency, snowdrift patterns, star positions, the angle of sunlight when available, even the smell of the air, which changes based on proximity to sea ice, vegetation, or animal populations. This environmental literacy takes years to develop and represents cumulative knowledge built up over generations. The psychological resilience required for surviving LGM winters deserves recognition. Modern psychology recognizes that prolonged darkness, extreme cold, social isolation, and monotonous diets create severe mental health challenges. Seasonal affective disorder, depression, anxiety, and interpersonal conflict all increase under these conditions. LGM populations must develop cultural practices that maintain mental health and social cohesion through months of darkness and confinement. Archaeological evidence from LGM sites reveals elaborate ritual and symbolic behaviors that probably serve psychological and social functions. Burials become more elaborate, with bodies often adorned with beads, pendants, and grave goods. Some individuals receive exceptional burial treatment, suggesting social hierarchies or special statuses. At Siberian in Russia, dated to around 24,000 years ago, excavators find burials of an adult man and 2 children covered with thousands of ivory beads that probably originally adorned their clothing. Creating these beads required thousands of hours of labor, a massive investment suggesting these individuals held special importance. Carved figurines, decorated tools, and ornamental objects appear at many LGM sites. These aren't just art for art's sake. They probably serve communicative and symbolic functions. Venus figurines might represent fertility symbols, protective spirits, or ancestor representations. Decorated tools might mark ownership, indicate skill level, or carry symbolic meanings that reinforce social bonds. Creating and exchanging these objects provides activities during long winter months when outdoor work is impossible. Music, though archaeologically invisible except for rare preserved instruments, probably plays crucial roles in LGM society. Modern ethnographic evidence shows that Arctic peoples use music for entertainment, social bonding, teaching, and ritual purposes. Songs encode knowledge about geography, resources, and history, serving as oral libraries that preserve information across generations. Drumming, chanting, and dancing provide physically warming activities during cold months and create shared emotional experiences that strengthen social cohesion. One of the most challenging aspects of LGM survival concerns children. Human children require years of intensive care and education before becoming productive members of society. In modern hunter-gatherer societies, children don't typically reach full economic productivity until their mid-teens. During this extended childhood, they represent economic costs. They consume resources, but contribute little yet. Societies must invest in them to ensure population continuity. Arctic environments make child-rearing especially challenging. Pregnant women must maintain pregnancy through winters when mobility is limited and resources can be scarce. Infants require constant warmth, making specialized clothing and dedicated caregivers necessary. Young children can't safely accompany hunters on dangerous expeditions, requiring some adults to remain at camps, providing childcare rather than directly procuring food. Yet children also represent opportunities for cultural transmission. Their years of dependency provide extended periods for teaching essential survival skills. Archaeological evidence suggests that children participate in tool-making from early ages. Crudely made stone tools found at sites probably represent childhood learning activities. Learning complex skills like flint knapping, hide processing, or trap construction requires years of practice, and childhood provides the time needed to develop expertise. The fact that LGM populations successfully raise children to adulthood, generation after generation, testifies to their effective social organization. This requires multiple individuals contributing to child support, not just parents, but extended family members. Experienced elders who teach skills and community members who share resources during difficult times. The African proverb, "It takes a village to raise a child," applies doubly to LGM Siberia, where community support isn't optional luxury, but survival necessity. Around 19,000 years ago, global temperatures began slowly rising. The shift is almost imperceptible at first, perhaps a degree over centuries, but It marks the beginning of the end for the last glacial maximum. Ice sheets begin their slow retreat. Sea levels start rising. Plant and animal communities begin shifting distributions. For LGM survivors, these changes bring both opportunities and challenges. Warming climate expands the range of habitable territories, allowing populations to spread into previously marginal regions. But it also disrupts established patterns. Animal migration routes change. Familiar landscapes transform. Resources that had been reliable become unpredictable. The populations that survive the LGM emerge hardened, sophisticated, carrying technological and cultural knowledge, representing thousands of years of accumulated wisdom. They have been tested by the coldest conditions Earth can offer and proved themselves capable of not just surviving but maintaining complex societies. They're ready for whatever challenges lie ahead. And ahead lies the final chapter in the long journey from Africa, the crossing into the Americas and the colonization of an entire hemisphere. The door is opening. The survivors of the last glacial maximum are about to take their final steps across the frozen lands of Siberia and walk into history. Chapter 8. From Beringia to Alaska. Beginning around 15,000 years ago, Beringia faces its death sentence. As global temperatures rise, the ice sheets that had locked up vast quantities of water for millennia begin releasing that water back to the oceans. Sea level starts rising slowly at first, just centimeters per decade, but inexorably, unstoppably. Each generation of Beringians sees slightly less land than their parents knew. Coastal camps must be relocated inland. Favorable river valleys become tidal estuaries, then bays, then open sea. The land bridge that had existed for tens of thousands of years begins to shrink. For modern humans, watching sea level rise at rates of 1 to 2 meters per century might not seem dramatically threatening. You can simply move inland, right? But for Beringian populations with territories defined by generations of accumulated knowledge, this valley with its reliable caribou migration routes, that hill where particular plants grow, this river crossing where fish congregate each spring, the loss of familiar landscapes represents catastrophe. The places that hold your stories, your history, your connection to ancestors, disappear beneath waves. Each flood tide advances a little farther than the last, claiming more of your homeland. By 13,000 years ago, Beringia had shrunk dramatically. The central portions, once hundreds of kilometers wide, narrow to increasingly constricted corridors. By 11,000 years ago, the land bridge disappeared entirely, replaced by the Bering Strait, the territory that sustained human populations for thousands of years, that served as the staging ground for humanity's entry into a new hemisphere, vanishes beneath 50 meters of ocean water. Today, fishing trawlers scrape their nets across the seabed where Ice Age hunters once pursued mammoths. As Beringia shrinks, populations face choices: retreat westward into Siberia, adapt to shrinking territories, or push eastward into Alaska. Archaeological evidence suggests all three strategies occur, but it's the eastward movement that captures our focus because it leads to one of history's most consequential migrations. Alaska during this period offers a landscape simultaneously familiar and foreign to Beringian peoples. The far north, the Arctic slope and northern coastal regions resembles Beringia in climate and ecology. The same mammoth steppe ecosystem persists here, supporting similar animal communities. For populations accustomed to Beringian life, these northern Alaskan territories present few novel challenges. Archaeological sites from this period show cultural continuity with Beringian traditions. But central and southern Alaska tell different stories. Here, the landscape fragments into more diverse ecosystems. Mountain ranges create barriers and microclimates. Forests begin appearing in river valleys, spruce and birch rather than the open steppe. For people whose entire way of life revolves around treeless grasslands and megafauna herds, these forested environments demand new strategies. Some populations resist the forests, maintaining steppe-adapted lifestyles in northern regions where familiar ecosystems persist. But others innovate, developing new technologies and strategies that allow exploitation of forested environments. At Broken Mammoth and Swan Point in central Alaska, dated to around 14,000 years ago, archaeologists find evidence of this transition. The sites contain tools characteristic of steppe traditions, but also show adaptations to forest environments, different projectile point styles suitable for hunting in thick vegetation, processing tools for working wood, and evidence of fishing that becomes more important as large game becomes less abundant. One of the most intriguing questions about human entry into Alaska concerns possible encounters with other human groups. Recent discoveries have revealed that the Americas' colonization history is far more complex than previously thought. Did the populations arriving from Beringia find an empty continent, or did they encounter earlier arrivals? The genetic and archaeological evidence suggests fascinating possibilities. Some archaeological sites in the Americas show signs of human presence dating earlier than the Clovis culture, possibly as early as 16,000 years ago or even earlier. If these dates hold, then the Beringian populations entering Alaska after the last glacial maximum aren't the first Americans. They're joining populations that arrived via earlier routes, possibly coastal migrations that occurred before the land bridge flooded. Ancient DNA adds intrigue to this story. Genetic analysis of early American populations reveals complexity that suggests multiple founding groups, possibly arriving at different times. Some genetic lineages appear to split from Asian populations earlier than others, hinting at pre-Beringian migrations. The population Y hypothesis proposed based on genetic signals in some Amazonian groups suggests that an unknown ancestral population contributed to early American ancestry, though whether this represents an earlier migration wave or simply unsampled Asian source populations remains debated. If different groups encountered each other in Alaska, what happened? Did they compete, avoiding each other and establishing separate territories? Did they cooperate, sharing knowledge about this vast new land? Or did they intermarry, blending populations and technologies? The archaeological record doesn't yet provide clear answers, but the genetic evidence of population mixing suggests that encounters probably involved both conflict and cooperation, with ultimate outcomes varying by region and circumstance. The movement from Beringia into Alaska and beyond requires technological adaptations that leave clear signatures in the archaeological record. Projectile point styles, the stone tips of spears, and, eventually, arrows undergo rapid evolution as populations adjust to new prey animals and hunting conditions. In Beringia, large lanceolate points designed for hunting mammoth, bison, and horses dominate assemblages. These points, often 10 to 15 centimeters long, are crafted to inflict massive wounds on large animals. But as populations move into more diverse Alaskan environments, point styles diversify. Smaller, lighter points appear better suited for hunting caribou in forests or for pursuing faster, more agile prey. Some points show adaptations for hafting, attaching to shafts, that suggest experimentation with different weapon systems. The atlatl, the spear thrower that multiplies throwing force, becomes increasingly important during this period. By using leverage, an atlatl allows a hunter to throw a dart-like projectile with velocity and force impossible to achieve with hand throwing alone. This technology probably existed in Beringia, but it proliferated as populations spread into the Americas, eventually becoming the dominant weapon system for thousands of years until the bow and arrow appeared much later. Fishing technology also advances. At Alaskan sites dating to this transitional period, archaeologists find fish bones in increasing quantities, along with tools associated with fishing bone hooks, harpoon heads, and processing tools. Some sites show evidence of fish weir structures built across streams to trap migrating salmon. This represents a significant subsistence shift. In Beringia, fishing provided supplemental food. In Alaska and beyond, it becomes a primary food source for many populations, especially those along rivers and coasts. One of the most remarkable aspects of human expansion into Alaska and the Americas is the speed of population growth. Starting from perhaps just a few thousand individuals in Beringia, populations exploded over the following millennia. By the time Europeans arrive in the Americas 15,000 years later, Native American populations number in the tens of millions, speaking hundreds of languages and occupying every imaginable environment from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforest. This rapid population growth requires explanation. Part of the answer lies in resource abundance. The Americas, particularly in their initial colonization phase, offer virgin hunting grounds where game animals have no instinctive fear of humans. Archaeological evidence of naive prey behavior animals that don't flee at human approach suggests that early hunters enjoyed success rates far higher than populations hunting in long exploited territories like Europe or Africa. But rapid population growth also requires high fertility rates and successful child-rearing. Hunter-gatherer populations typically maintain relatively low population densities, limited by the carrying capacity of their territories. But in the resource-rich Americas, these limitations relax. More food means healthier mothers who can support more pregnancies and nurse children longer. Abundant resources mean higher childhood survival rates. The result is exponential population growth, the classic pattern of organisms entering environments with abundant resources and few competitors. This growth drives continued expansion. As populations increase, local resources come under pressure. Young adults seeking territories of their own must push into new regions. This creates a wave of advanced model where populations expand at their frontiers while maintaining stable densities in long-occupied core regions. Computer simulations suggest that even modest population growth rates, perhaps 2 to 3% per year, can drive expansion waves that cross entire continents in just a few thousand years. The entry of humans into the Americas coincides with one of the most dramatic extinction events of the last 50,000 years. Within roughly 1,000 to 2,000 years of human arrival, North and South America lose over 70 species of large mammals. Mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, horses, camels, short-faced bears, saber-toothed cats, giant armadillos, and dozens of other species disappear. Some, like horses, vanish completely from the Americas but survive in Eurasia. Others, like mammoths and ground sloths, go globally extinct. What caused these extinctions? The debate has raged for decades, with two primary hypotheses competing for acceptance. The overkill hypothesis proposes that human hunting drove megafauna to extinction. Armed with sophisticated weapons and cooperative hunting strategies, humans decimated populations of large, slow-reproducing animals that had evolved no defenses against human predation. The climate change hypothesis argues that rapid environmental changes at the end of the Ice Age disrupted ecosystems, fragmenting habitats and reducing food availability until megafauna populations collapsed. Modern evidence suggests both factors played roles, though their relative importance remains debated. Climate change certainly stressed megafauna populations, changing vegetation patterns. Habitat fragmentation and environmental instability all took tolls. But human predation likely delivered the final blow to populations already struggling with environmental change. Even modest hunting pressure, just a few animals killed per year per human group, can drive extinction in species with low reproductive rates like mammoths, which had pregnancy periods of nearly 2 years and raised a single calf at a time. The timing provides strong circumstantial evidence for human involvement. Megafauna extinctions occur in different regions at different times, but they consistently follow human arrival. In Australia, Megafauna disappear around 45,000 years ago, shortly after humans arrive. In the Americas, extinctions cluster around 13,000 to 11,000 years ago, precisely when human populations explode across the continents. In Madagascar, megafauna survive until just 2,000 years ago, when humans first reached the island. This pattern of extinctions following human arrival, replicated across multiple continents and islands, suggests that humans are at least a contributing factor. Archaeological evidence supports direct human predation on megafauna. Kill sites preserve mammoth and bison carcasses with stone projectile points embedded in bones or lying among butchered remains. At some sites, the quantity of remains suggests systematic, repeated hunting rather than occasional opportunistic kills. At Murray Springs in Arizona, excavators found the remains of 13 mammoths along with Clovis artifacts, suggesting coordinated hunting of multiple animals. The ecological and cultural consequences of megafauna extinctions deserve consideration. These animals weren't just food sources. They were ecosystem engineers whose activities shaped entire landscapes. Mammoths knocked down trees, creating openings that maintained grasslands. Their dung fertilized soils and spread seeds across vast distances. Their migrations created paths that other animals followed. Their wallows became water sources during dry seasons. The loss of these ecosystem engineers triggered cascading effects that transformed American environments. For human populations, megafauna extinctions forced major subsistence changes. Populations that had specialized in mammoth hunting faced a choice: diversify subsistence strategies or follow the declining herds into extinction. Most chose diversification. Archaeological evidence shows increasing exploitation of smaller game deer, rabbits, birds alongside intensification of fishing and plant gathering. Some populations shifted toward primarily maritime subsistence, exploiting sea mammals, fish, and shellfish. Others developed sophisticated plant management strategies, eventually leading to agriculture. The cultural impact of losing megafauna is harder to trace, but probably significant. Mammoth hunting wasn't just practical. It carried social and symbolic meanings. Success in hunting validated social status. Hunting prowess attracted mates and followers. Mammoth ivory provided raw material for tools and art. The loss of mammoths meant losing not just a food source, but a cultural foundation. New cultural systems had to emerge, built around different resources and different measures of success. As populations spread from Alaska throughout the Americas, they diverged physically, culturally, linguistically. The archaeological record from 12,000 years ago onward shows increasing regional variation in tool styles, site organization, subsistence strategies, and artistic expressions. The uniform Clovis culture, which briefly spread across North America around 13,000 years ago, fractures into dozens of distinct regional traditions. This diversification reflects adaptation to different environments. Populations moving into the Great Plains develop bison hunting specializations. Those settling in the Pacific Northwest create complex maritime cultures based on salmon fishing and sea mammal hunting. Groups reaching the Arctic develop specialized ice hunting technologies. Desert populations master water management and seed gathering. Each environment poses unique challenges, and each population develops distinctive solutions. Language diversification occurs simultaneously. Today, scholars recognize dozens of Native American language families, groups of related languages descended from common ancestors. This linguistic diversity developed over the 15,000 years since initial colonization, as populations separated geographically and developed independently. The distribution of language families provides clues about ancient migration routes and population relationships. Genetic diversification also occurs, though all Native American populations retain their fundamental ancestry from Beringian source populations. Different groups show varying frequencies of genetic markers, reflecting both random genetic drift in small populations and possible local adaptations to different environments. The overall pattern shared deep ancestry, with increasing differentiation over time matches expectations for populations descending from common sources, but separating and evolving independently. By 10,000 years ago, human populations occupied all habitable parts of the Americas, from the Arctic to Tierra del Fuego. The journey from Africa has reached its culmination. Humans have spread to every continent except Antarctica, adapting to every major climate zone Earth offers. The crossing of Siberia and Beringia, the passage through ice, the spread across the Americas, these represent just the final chapters in the greatest migration story in human history. But for the people living through these events, there's no sense of completing a grand journey. They're simply living their lives, following resources, raising families, solving the immediate challenges of survival. They don't know they're making history. They don't know that thousands of years later, scientists will puzzle over how they accomplished seemingly impossible feats. They're just humans, doing what humans do, adapting, innovating, persisting. The frozen lands of Siberia tested humanity to its limits, but we passed the test. The technologies, social structures, and cognitive capabilities that allowed survival in the Arctic ultimately allowed us to colonize the world. The story of the first Siberians is the story of human ingenuity, resilience, and adaptability. It's a story that continues today as modern humans face new challenges and demonstrate the same innovative spirit that carried our ancestors across the frozen roof of the world. Chapter 9: Modern Discoveries and Ancient DNA. For most of human history, the story of how our ancestors crossed the frozen lands of Siberia remained locked in mystery. Archaeologists could find stone tools and butchered bones, map out ancient campsites, and trace the spread of human populations through dating techniques. But crucial questions remained unanswered. Who exactly were these people? How did different populations relate to each other? What happened when different human groups met? Then, in the late 20th century, a revolution began. Scientists developed techniques for extracting and analyzing DNA from ancient remains, bones, teeth, hair, even sediments where ancient peoples lived. This ancient DNA, aDNA, provides direct access to genetic information from people who lived tens of thousands of years ago, allowing researchers to reconstruct family trees, trace migrations, and identify interbreeding between different human groups. The first major breakthrough came in 1997 when researchers successfully extracted and sequenced DNA from Neanderthal remains. The results shocked the scientific community. Neanderthals were genetically distinct from modern humans, supporting the hypothesis that they represented a separate species or subspecies. But the real surprise came later, when better sequencing technology revealed that Neanderthals and modern humans had interbred. Everyone with ancestry outside Africa carries 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA, genetic gifts from encounters that occurred tens of thousands of years ago in the Middle East and Eurasia. The discovery of Denisovans followed. In 2010, researchers analyzing a tiny finger bone from Denisova Cave in Siberia found DNA that matched neither modern humans nor Neanderthals. This previously unknown human lineage, now called Denisovans, lived across Asia and interbred with our ancestors. Modern Melanesians carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. Some Tibetan populations carry Denisovan genetic variants that help them thrive at high altitudes. These aren't abstract scientific findings. They're revelations about human diversity, adaptation, and the complex web of encounters that shaped our species. Ancient DNA has revolutionized understanding of how humans reached the Americas. Before genetic studies, archaeologists debated whether humans crossed into Alaska 13,000 years ago, 15,000 years ago, or much earlier. Genetic analysis has provided unprecedented clarity. By comparing DNA from modern Native American populations with ancient DNA from Asian populations, geneticists can reconstruct population history. The data reveals that Native Americans descend primarily from a single ancestral population that split from Asian groups between 25,000 and 20,000 years ago. But this split wasn't a clean break. Instead, the ancestral population remained partially isolated for thousands of years, likely in Beringia, before expanding into the Americas around 15,000 to 13,000 years ago. This Beringian standstill model, proposed by geneticist Eske Willerslev and colleagues, explains several puzzling observations. It accounts for why Native American genetic diversity is relatively low compared to Asian populations. A bottleneck occurred when a small founding population became isolated in Beringia. It explains why Native Americans carry unique genetic variants not found in modern Asian populations. These variants arose during the isolation period. And it matches archaeological evidence showing that the ice-free corridor didn't become passable until relatively late, requiring populations to wait in Beringia before entering the Americas proper. Recent studies have added complexity to this picture. Analysis of ancient DNA from early American sites reveals that at least 3 separate migration streams contributed to Native American ancestry. The majority of Native Americans descend from the first migration, but some northern groups show evidence of later arrivals. And intriguingly, some South American populations carry genetic signals suggesting a fourth, still poorly understood ancestral component, possibly representing an earlier migration wave. One of the most exciting ancient DNA discoveries comes from the Yana rhinoceros horn site in Arctic Siberia. Among the thousands of artifacts and animal bones, excavators found human remains teeth from what researchers call the Yana boys, young individuals who lived at this remote Arctic site 31,000 years ago. DNA extracted from these teeth tells a fascinating story. The Yana boys weren't directly ancestral to modern Native Americans, but they were closely related to the population that eventually gave rise to both Native Americans and some northern Asian groups. They represent a lineage that split from other human populations around 38,000 years ago and adapted specifically to Arctic conditions. Genetic analysis reveals that these ancient Arctic peoples carried gene variants that likely helped them survive extreme cold. Some of these variants affect metabolism, helping bodies generate and conserve heat efficiently. Others influence blood vessel function in extremities, reducing frostbite risk. Still others affect fat distribution and insulin sensitivity, crucial for surviving on high-fat diets during periods when plant foods were unavailable. These genetic adaptations didn't arise instantaneously. They represent thousands of years of natural selection, where individuals carrying beneficial variants survived Arctic winters more successfully than those without them. The fact that similar genetic variants appear in some modern Arctic peoples, Inuit, Aleuts, and some Siberian groups suggests either that these variants spread through populations or that Arctic conditions repeatedly favored similar genetic solutions. Ancient DNA allows reconstruction of migration patterns with unprecedented detail. By analyzing DNA from remains found at different locations and time periods, researchers can trace how populations moved across landscapes and how different groups related to each other. One striking discovery concerns the Malta boy, a child buried at Malta in south-central Siberia around 24,000 years ago. Analysis of his DNA revealed something unexpected. He carried genetic signatures related to both modern Native Americans and modern Northern Europeans. This suggests that ancient Siberian populations were incredibly wide-ranging, with genetic connections spanning from Europe to the Americas. The Malta find supports what geneticists call the ancient North Eurasian ancestry component, a ghost population that once lived across northern Eurasia but has largely been replaced by later migrations. This ancestral group contributed to both Native Americans via Beringia and Europeans via complex population movements during and after the Ice Age. The realization that Native Americans carry genetic ancestry linking them to ancient Europeans, not through recent contact, but through shared descent from ancient Eurasian populations, has fundamentally reshaped understanding of human population history. Other ancient DNA studies have traced more recent migrations. Analysis of remains from Alaska dating to 11,500 years ago shows genetic continuity with earlier Beringian populations, confirming that the same peoples who weathered the last glacial maximum in Beringia went on to colonize the Americas. Studies of remains from various American sites trace the spread of populations southward, revealing that Clovis culture wasn't carried by a separate migration, but arose from populations already living in North America. One of the most innovative recent developments involves extracting DNA not from human or animal remains, but from sediments, the dirt where ancient peoples lived. Sedimentary DNA, preserved in cave floors, lake bottoms, and permafrost, contains genetic fragments from all the organisms that once lived in these environments. Humans, animals, plants, even microbes. This technique has revealed extraordinary details about Ice Age ecosystems. At Denisova Cave, sediment DNA shows not just that humans, Neanderthals, and Denisovans occupied the cave at various times, but also what animals lived nearby, what plants grew in the surrounding landscape, and how these communities changed over thousands of years. Researchers have detected mammoth DNA, hyena DNA, plant DNA from species that no longer grow in the region, creating detailed reconstructions of ancient environments. Perhaps most remarkably, scientists have begun extracting DNA from ocean sediments off Alaska and Siberia sediments that accumulated on dry land during the Ice Age when sea levels were lower. This Beringian sediment DNA preserves genetic information from the lost land bridge, revealing what plants and animals lived there, and potentially, with continued technical advances, might even detect human DNA, providing direct evidence of populations that lived in regions now beneath the sea. While DNA reveals ancestry and relationships, isotope analysis provides different insights: what ancient people ate, where they traveled, even how they were weaned as infants. This technique analyzes chemical signatures in bones and teeth, comparing ratios of different isotope variants that accumulate based on diet and environment. Carbon and nitrogen isotopes reveal dietary patterns. People eating primarily marine foods show different isotopic signatures than those eating terrestrial animals or plants. Analysis of remains from Siberian sites confirms what archaeological evidence suggests. These populations depended heavily on large terrestrial herbivores, with some coastal groups supplementing with marine resources. Strontium isotopes, which vary based on local geology, reveal mobility patterns. Teeth, which form during childhood and don't remodel later, preserve strontium signatures from where individuals grew up. Bones, which constantly remodel, reflect more recent residents. By comparing tooth and bone strontium signatures, researchers can identify individuals who moved during their lifetimes, perhaps women moving to their husbands, communities or groups relocating due to resource availability changes. At some Siberian sites, isotope analysis reveals surprising dietary flexibility. During harsh periods, people show increased reliance on whatever resources were available: fish, small mammals, even plant materials that would normally be rejected as poor quality foods. This dietary flexibility, revealed through chemistry, confirms the behavioral adaptability that genetic and archaeological evidence already suggested. Climate reconstruction and environmental context. Understanding how humans crossed Siberia requires understanding the environments they encountered. Climate reconstruction, using multiple lines of evidence, provides this context. Ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica preserve air bubbles from ancient atmospheres. revealing past temperatures and atmospheric composition. Lake cores contain pollen grains showing what plants grew nearby at different times. Stalagmites in caves record rainfall patterns through their growth layers. Ocean sediments preserve shells of tiny organisms whose chemistry reflects water temperature. These diverse data sources combine to create detailed climate histories. We now know that the last glacial maximum was even colder than previously thought. Global temperatures dropped 6 to 8 degrees Celsius below modern values, with some regions experiencing drops of 15 to 20 degrees. We know that climate fluctuated dramatically on timescales of decades to centuries, with abrupt warming and cooling events that would have profoundly affected human populations. One crucial discovery concerns the Younger Dryas period around 12,900 to 11,700 years ago, when climate briefly returned to near-glacial conditions after warming had begun. This cold snap appears in climate records worldwide and coincides with major ecological changes in North America. Extinction of remaining megafauna, reorganization of plant communities, and changes in human archaeological cultures. Whether the Younger Dryas directly caused these changes or simply coincided with them remains debated, but the correlation is striking. While DNA and isotopes grab headlines, advances in archaeological technology have also revolutionized understanding of ancient Siberian peoples. Ground-penetrating radar allows archaeologists to map underground features without excavating, revealing buried structures, identifying promising sites, and planning excavations more effectively. LIDAR, light detection and ranging technology, uses laser scanning to create detailed terrain maps even in dense forests. This has revealed ancient landscapes modified by human activity. Earthworks, hunting structures, trails, and settlement patterns invisible from ground level. In Alaska and Siberia, LiDAR surveys are beginning to reveal the extent of ancient human landscape modification. 3D scanning and digital reconstruction allow detailed analysis of artifacts without touching them, crucial for fragile materials. Researchers can examine wear patterns on stone tools at microscopic levels, identifying what materials each tool processed. They can reconstruct broken pottery virtually, matching fragments found far apart. They can create exact replicas for experimental archaeology, testing how ancient tools performed without risking damage to originals. Perhaps most significantly, computers allow sophisticated modeling of past human behavior. Researchers create simulations testing different hypotheses. If humans entered Alaska 15,000 years ago with X population size and Y growth rate, could they reach South America by 14,000 years ago? If megafauna extinctions resulted from Z hunting pressure, does the archaeological evidence match predictions? These models don't prove what happened, but help researchers understand what's plausible and what's impossible, guiding interpretation of archaeological evidence. The story of how humans crossed the frozen lands of Siberia continues to be written. Each new discovery adds detail, complexity, and sometimes confusion to our understanding. Sites thought to be securely dated get re-evaluated using new techniques. Genetic studies reveal previously unknown populations. Climate reconstructions identify environmental changes that might have influenced human migrations. In just the past decade, major discoveries have reshaped the field. Confirmation of pre-Clovis sites in the Americas, discovery of the Denisovans, development of sediment DNA techniques, and genetic sequencing of dozens of ancient individuals from across Eurasia. The pace of discovery accelerates as technology improves and researchers explore regions previously inaccessible. Siberia, with its vast permafrost regions, holds particular promise. Frozen ground preserves organic materials, including DNA, far better than temperate soils. As permafrost thaws due to modern climate change, ancient sites emerge from frozen ground, providing unprecedented preservation of materials that would have rotted away elsewhere. This, paleontological emergency, as some researchers call it, requires urgent action to study sites before thawing destroys them, but also offers unique opportunities to recover evidence about ancient peoples. The frozen lands that tested our ancestors to their limits now reveal their secrets, preserved in ice for millennia. Each discovery honors their memory and illuminates their achievements. The story of the first Siberians isn't ancient history, it's a living investigation, constantly evolving as new evidence emerges. And we're privileged to witness this story unfolding, discovering how our ancestors accomplished what seemed impossible, conquering the harshest environments Earth could offer and opening pathways to an entire hemisphere. How did the first humans cross the frozen lands of Siberia? We now have our answer, complex, multifaceted, and remarkable in its scope. They crossed through extraordinary technological innovation, sophisticated clothing that trapped body heat, shelters designed to conserve warmth, fire mastery that created tropical microclimates in Arctic cold, and hunting technologies that allowed them to bring down the largest animals on Earth. They crossed through social organization, large cooperative groups that shared resources and knowledge, exchange networks that spanned thousands of kilometers, marriage systems that maintained genetic diversity, and specialization that allowed development of expertise no individual could achieve alone. They crossed through accumulated knowledge, detailed understanding of animal behavior, recognition of subtle environmental cues, navigation techniques for featureless landscapes, and wisdom about surviving winters that lasted 9 months. This knowledge, transmitted across generations through teaching and storytelling, represented humanity's first libraries, stored not in books, but in minds and practices. They crossed through cognitive capabilities, abstract thinking that allowed planning for distant futures, language that enabled complex communication, social learning that let each generation build on predecessors' achievements, and behavioral flexibility that allowed rapid adaptation to novel challenges. They crossed through sheer determination and resilience, generation after generation, persisting through conditions that would kill unprepared humans within hours, maintaining cultural continuity through the coldest epochs, and continuously pushing boundaries into territories no human had ever seen. The crossing wasn't a single event, but a process spanning tens of thousands of years. It began around 70,000 years ago, when modern humans left Africa, carrying cognitive and technological capabilities that would eventually enable Arctic survival. It continued through the Middle East and Asia as populations developed increasingly sophisticated cold weather adaptations. It intensified during the last glacial maximum as people successfully inhabited the coldest regions of Siberia and Beringia. The crossing reached its culmination between 15,000 and 13,000 years ago, when populations moved from Beringia into Alaska and beyond, ultimately spreading throughout the Americas within just a few millennia. This represented the completion of humanity's colonization of terrestrial environments from tropical origins to the Arctic and beyond. Throughout this journey, spanning 600 to 700 generations, populations maintained cultural continuity while adapting to increasingly diverse and challenging environments. The people who reached the Americas weren't fundamentally different from those who left Africa. They were descendants carrying forward an unbroken chain of cultural knowledge, enhanced and refined across thousands of years. This ancient history matters today because it reveals fundamental truths about human nature. We are adaptable. We are innovative. We are social beings whose greatest achievements come through cooperation. We are knowledge bearers, accumulating wisdom across generations. We are persistent, capable of overcoming seemingly impossible challenges. These characteristics didn't disappear with the Ice Age. They define us still. Every human society today descends from people who survived the challenges of Ice Age existence. Some descend from the Siberians who crossed the frozen lands. Others from tropical populations who adapted to different challenges. Still others from groups who faced entirely different environments. But all of us carry the legacy of ancestors who survived when survival was never guaranteed, who adapted when adaptation meant the difference between life and death, who innovated because innovation was essential. The story of crossing Siberia is ultimately a story about possibility, about what humans can achieve when circumstances demand it. Our ancestors looked at the most hostile landscape Earth offered and found ways not just to survive, but to thrive. They didn't have modern technology, scientific knowledge, or global support networks. They had stone tools, animal skins, fire, and each other. And that proved sufficient. As we face contemporary challenges, climate change that may rival Ice Age climate shifts, environmental degradation unprecedented in human history, technological changes transforming how we live, we can draw inspiration and instruction from those first Siberians. They teach us that preparation matters. Populations that developed appropriate technologies and knowledge systems before facing Arctic conditions survived. Those that didn't often perished. Today, we must similarly develop solutions to emerging problems before they become crises. They teach us that cooperation is essential. No individual or small group could master all skills needed for Arctic survival, and no nation or community today can address global challenges alone. We need cooperation at scales our ancestors never attempted. They teach us that knowledge must be preserved and transmitted. Societies that maintained cultural knowledge across generations succeeded. Those that lost crucial information struggled. Today, preserving both traditional and scientific knowledge while making it accessible to future generations remains essential. They teach us that adaptability and innovation define humanity. When established strategies stopped working, successful populations developed new approaches. Today, we must similarly remain flexible, willing to change methods when conditions change. Most importantly, they teach us that humans are capable of extraordinary achievements when necessary. The crossing of Siberia ranks among the most impressive accomplishments in human history, a testament to ingenuity, persistence, and the power of cultural evolution to overcome biological limitations. The frozen lands of Siberia that tested our ancestors to their limits now face unprecedented changes as modern climate warming thaws permafrost and transforms Arctic ecosystems. The land bridge that once connected continents lies beneath modern seas. The mammoths our ancestors hunted exist only as frozen carcasses preserved in ice and as genetic material scientists hope to resurrect through cloning. But the legacy of the first Siberians endures in the indigenous peoples who maintain living connections to these migrations, in the genetic signatures carried by billions of modern humans, in the archaeological sites that preserve evidence of their lives, and in the human capabilities for adaptation, innovation, and persistence that they exemplified. Their story reminds us that we are descendants of survivors, heirs to traditions of resilience that span hundreds of generations. When we face challenges that seem insurmountable, when problems appear too complex or too daunting, we can remember that our ancestors looked at the frozen roof of the world and decided to cross it anyway. They succeeded, they survived, they thrived, and their success opened pathways that ultimately carried humanity to every corner of Earth. The frozen lands of Siberia weren't a barrier that stopped human expansion. They were a challenge that human ingenuity overcame, proving that for a remarkable species, there truly is no frontier we cannot cross, no challenge we cannot meet, no environment we cannot eventually learn to call home. That is how the first humans crossed the frozen lands of Siberia, with courage, intelligence, cooperation, and an unbreakable will to survive and thrive. Their achievement stands as one of humanity's greatest triumphs, a testament to what we can accomplish when we face the impossible and refuse to accept defeat. The frozen lands have been crossed. The journey continues,